We are now talking to Big Blue Banter and Big Blue View writer and podcast host, Nick Falato. Nick, what's going on, bud?
Fellas, thank you so much for having me on the Loudmouth podcast. How you guys doing?
Well, you know what's funny? Everybody calls us a podcast. We are not a podcast. We are a live radio show. We air throughout the world, and we are on 103.9 FM every single week. So we're happy to have you, Nick. And first of all, you're the first Giant analyst or writer or podcaster we've had on this show in a very long time. So you should be very welcome for all the Giant fans. Yeah, well,
I feel well.
Well, you know what? We'll have you laughing by the end of this interview. That's for sure. Anyways, so before we get into this, how are you and your family doing with the pandemic?
Oh, we're doing well, man. I mean, I moved out to Phoenix, so I'm out here with my girlfriend who is in flight school, and I got my bulldog with me out here. So I don't live on the East Coast anymore, so it's a little bit earlier out here than it is for you guys up there.
Oh, she's a flyer. She's a pilot, huh?
Yeah, she's a pilot. Yeah, she flies Sirius right now with the United Aviate Academy. It's pretty cool stuff.
Look at that, man. Radio guy / writer / sports guy. So that's good. That's good. Is she like?
It's not as cool. It's not as cool.
That's cool. That's cool to me. By the way, is she a sports fan?
Yeah, a little bit, but nothing too crazy. Yeah, she's not really big into football, but she likes soccer.
What made you become a Giant fan, by the way?
I was born into it, man. When I was a kid, my dad always loves telling the story. Diehard Giant fan. My middle name is Mark, after Mark Bavaro, so it's been around my life forever. So when I was a kid, I went into a store, and this nice old man gave me this little stuffed teddy bear. Just wanted to give this to a nice little kid that he saw. Had a Dallas Cowboy insignia on its chest. I took it. I'm about 4 years old at this point, boys. I took this thing, and I said, ew, Dallas, and I threw it back at the individual. And the guy laughed and looked at my father and was like, you got this kid brainwashed already. So it's pretty awesome. My entire life, diehard Giant fan. So it's been a pleasure covering the team professionally.
Well, we are talking to Big Blue Banter, Big Blue View writer and podcast host, Nick Falato. So, Nick, why don't we get into the Giants? Today was the final cuts for the New York Giants. What stood out to you so far on some of the cuts and where this team is in 2022?
I don't think it's done yet. I think the roster, it's such a fluid situation right now, and there's going to be so many guys who apparently made the 53-man roster who aren't going to be there come week 1 against Tennessee. I also think it's unfortunate that players like Quincy Roche didn't make the roster, but at the same time, this is a new system coming in. You have a new coaching staff. This is the new general manager. There's always going to be turnover, and I think that this current coaching staff valued the overall size and versatility of a player like O'Shane Ximines, who hasn't done much since he came to the New York Giants in 2019. So it sucks that Quincy Roche got the axe. Hopefully the Giants can stash him on the practice squad, but I think there might be another 5-6 players who are not on the roster who could come in the coming days, turn this roster over, and just try to fill these key positions that are weak right now. Tight end, cornerback. They need to get some healthy bodies in there, maybe even interior offensive line, because we don't know what's going on with Ben Bredesen's injury or Joshua Ozudu's injury. It looks like Shane Lemieux could possibly end up on IR. Now, don't quote me on that. We'll have to see. But I think some of these guys made the final 53-man roster just so they can qualify for the short-term IR. Lemieux, Rodarius Williams, possibly Ellerson Smith. That's going to open up more roster spots for possibly Quincy Roche if he goes to the practice squad, or Trenton Thompson, or more likely players who are not on the roster right now who were just cut by their respective teams.
I'm hoping that, because there were a couple tight ends that seem intriguing that the Giants would definitely target, especially. And you mentioned it with the linebackers, too. I definitely would want them to target more depth than that because they lost Darian Beavers for the season as well. So my question is based on the two guys that have been rumored to be traded during the training camp process. Darius Slayton was one, and Blake Martinez was another. What have you been hearing about those rumors recently, and do you think it's realistic?
I think the Darius Slayton one is realistic. You have Rap Sheet and Adam Schefter discussing it. I didn't project him to make the roster because he's been injured a lot throughout training camp, and he didn't really get a lot of first-team snaps outside of week 1 against the Patriots, and he had that hamstring injury. So usually when not earning reps, you're the 5th receiver in a best-case scenario. You don't add value on special teams, and you cost $2.5 million against the cap, and you've had 2 really inefficient seasons over the last 2 years. It's not spelling well for your roster chances, but I think he's a vertical threat. I think he does have value, and I think he's a talented player. I don't know if it's fiscally responsible or even doable for the Giants to retain him if they want to add other players to their roster. So if there are teams biting and trying to get Darius Slayton for their wide receiver core, maybe the Green Bay Packers or a team like that, then it makes sense for the Giants to hold out, put him on the 53, and then trade him and get maybe like a 7th-round pick or a 6th-round pick, what have you. It won't be anything too extravagant, but that does make sense. But there's also the argument, man, and fiscally, I'm not sure if it can work. The Giants don't have a vertical separator who can play on the outside consistently. You have Kenny Golladay. That's not a vertical separator. That's a contested catch guy at best. Then you have David Sills, Cool story. But is David Sills going to be separating from these NFL-style wide receivers? I don't think so. I think ultimately he's going to get traded, though. I think that's what he's destined. And as for Blake Martinez, I think Blake Martinez is going to make this roster like he did, and he's going to play, but he's not going to be that every down linebacker. Wink Martindale's defenses typically don't have all these players playing every down. He likes to rotate. He likes to use creative packages. Blake Martinez is getting a little long in the tooth. He's coming off of an injury. You have Tay Crowder, who has developed nicely in this system so far this summer, and you also have Micah McFadden. Wish Darian Beavers was still there, but he's not. I don't know if Austin Colatro and Carter Coughlin will make the end roster, and I know they made the final roster at this point, but let's see if they're still here at week 1, but they can also cycle in. They'll add value on special teams. I think Blake Martinez will be the number 1 linebacker, but he's not going to be playing 3 downs. I think one of the 2 players on defense that will play probably all the snaps if they're healthy are Dory Jackson and Xavier McKinney, who you guys were talking about before the break. Xavier McKinney, that guy is primed for a huge breakout season, and he has the C on his chest now, and he's earned it. And that kid, man, he's young. He's explosive. He is very smart, and he's going to be doing everything on the back end of that defense and blitzing, which is something he did not do really at all in Patrick Graham's system.
Well, they love him, and I've heard Dable preaching so many good things about him at the press conference and saying that this kid, he takes responsibility for the team, takes responsibility for his mistakes. And that's all you ask for a player, to go out there and give it your best. And if you know you're not giving it your best, to speak out and tell the players to work harder and press. So that's a good sign for a young player like McKinney, who's been in the league for almost, it's going on 3 years. And he really hasn't grown into the player that everybody thought he was going to be. He was a 2nd-round draft pick. He fell out of the 1st round, and a lot of people thought he was a 1st-round talent, and
a lot of people thought the best safety in the draft.
Yeah, and he fell out of the 1st round, maybe because of his work ethic.
To me, he fell out of the 1st round just because safeties are being a little bit more devalued recently. Kyle Hamilton, you saw him go in the 1st round in this last draft, but he ran a 4.64 40, and that kind of did him in at that point, and he slid a little bit. And I think it's just excellent that the Giants were able to nab him in the 2nd round there, because I think the upside for a player like Xavier McKinney is so damn high, and the kid does work his ass off. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to his development and growth here. Hopefully he stays healthy, because that's been a big sticking point for the Giants so far in training camp and preseason.
As everybody knows, we are talking to Big Blue Banter, Big Blue View writer and podcast host Nick Falato. Nick, Daniel Jones needs and must have a good year. He really needs to stand out for the Giant fans to shut up about him, stop pouring the abuse that they have been putting on him since he's come to this team. The whole Justin Herbert, they wanted Justin Herbert. It wasn't going to happen. He decided to stay in college for another year, and then he went out in the next year and went to the Chargers. It just didn't work out. But, again, Daniel Jones, I feel, has the talent and has the ability to really succeed in the NFL. He's got the legs. I believe he has a good arm. He doesn't have an Eli Manning arm where he could throw it down 70 yards and compete like that way. But he's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not Aaron Rodgers. But I think he could do a lot of different things that other quarterbacks can't do in the league, especially use his legs. I think Dable is the quarterback whisperer in the NFL. Everybody keeps talking about this guy and that guy, Josh McDaniels, everywhere Josh McDaniels, even when he went to the Broncos. What did he do? He drafted Tim Tebow, and he lost his job in a year. It didn't work out over there. Now he's over there with the Las Vegas Raiders. We'll see how he succeeds over there. But we've seen a lot of different people say that they're the quarterback whisperer. Dable, I believe, knows what he's doing at the quarterback position. I see what Josh Allen turned into after 3 years. His release point, everything changed. His footwork, the way he plants his feet, the way he throws off his front foot, everything that he has done, to change his offensive way of playing the quarterback position. It's made him one of the elite quarterbacks, one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. I don't know if Daniel Jones has the talent of Josh Allen, but if Dable can turn Daniel Jones for where he probably is ranked 26 or 27 in the NFL to number 12, number 13 in the NFL, right there with a Kirk Cousins or somebody like that, or a Dak Prescott, you can win with him. And I think Dable believes in him. He's had a very good preseason. I've heard he's looked very good at the camps. Everything that we've heard is his growth is definitely high. Where do you see Daniel Jones this year? Do you think, honestly, Daniel Jones could be the quarterback of the future for the New York Giants?
I don't. Declining their fifth-year option, there's a little bit of a tea leaf there. I think he would have to move mountains to earn a long-term contract. Now, if he plays really well, then I feel like the Giants could give him one of those small deals, those short-term deals that have built-in incentives, and also a deal that they can get out of if he ends up falling flat on his face, because he hasn't shown a lot since he's been the New York Giants quarterback.
No.
And he's had, and John Mara put it well, I mean, they've done everything to ruin this kid. The offensive line, Jason Garrett as his play caller and offensive coordinator, the lack of weapons, Saquon Barkley getting injured. He has a lot of excuses in his back pocket, but I do believe Daniel Jones, his ceiling to me is like a Kirk Cousins. That's what I think his ceiling is. I don't think he can get
a good ceiling.
That's a ceiling though. Like, I don't think he can get near what Josh Allen is.
You can win with Kirk Cousins. I mean,
yeah, you could. But do you want to tie up big money into Kirk Cousins?
No, you're absolutely right. But if you look at Kirk Cousins' numbers, even with the Washington football team, and then going over there to the Minnesota Vikings, his numbers are as good as anybody's in the NFL. Yeah. And if you compare his numbers in the last 5 years or 6 years of all the quarterbacks in the NFL, Kirk Cousins is a top 7, top 8 quarterback. People just forget, where he came from and what round he was drafted in. He was drafted in the 4th round. And he was drafted with RG3, who was the second pick, which, by the way, the Washington football team traded 3 first-round draft picks to move up to that position. And RG3 he's an ESPN analyst, and this guy is a starting quarterback in the NFL, and I believe still a top 10, top 12 quarterback in the NFL. So what does that tell you? So it just shows you that it doesn't matter what round you're drafted in. It just matters how much work you put in and really your talent. Where's your talent and who you are as a quarterback in the NFL. So I do believe Daniel Jones could be a successful quarterback in this league. And why not with the Giants? If he throws 4,000 yards this year with the wide receivers he has, and Saquon Barkley's running all over people, and the Giants win 8 or 9 games, and they squeak into the playoffs, you have to sign this kid. You can't just say, oh, you know what, we'll give him incentives, we'll give him that, and we'll still draft a quarterback in the draft, and we'll have them play for the position. Daniel Jones is not going to like that. He's not going to sit there and say, well, I'll accept that. So because to me, if he's showing growth, he's still young. How old is Daniel Jones? 25? I mean, you're gonna give up on a 25-year-old kid who, by the way, just had nobody to coach him? Who was his coaches? I mean, the Giants have had some lackluster idiots over there. Their offensive coordinators, idiots. I mean, I'm not going to take shots at Judge. Okay, I think he's a nice guy. He tried to be too much like Bill Belichick. He's not Bill Belichick. And now he's the offensive whatever. He's the dual offensive coordinator for the Patriots. And he's going to fail there too because he's just not a good, top-end coach. And the Giants trusted in him. It didn't work. He couldn't help develop this kid. Now they finally got a smart guy in there that actually knows how to develop a quarterback. If he develops, why would you give up on him? I understand what you're saying, Nick, because of the quarterback class next year. But you can't just give up on somebody just because, hey, you know what? He looked bad for the last 2 years, so give up on him even if he throws 4,000 yards and gives you 22 touchdowns with a crappy wide receiving core.